Now, our first speaker really does not need any introduction. Tim Brown is a national icon and has achieved global recognition and success in not one, but 2 careers. And he's joined by another overachiever, this time from across the ditch, Ed Cowan. Ed is also a professional sportsman, he was a professional cricketer, and now investor at growth equity firm TDM. Please give a very, very warm welcome to our first speakers of the day, Ed Cowan and Tim Brown.
Samantha Wong, that was awesome. Thank you for the introduction. I get the privilege of hosting the first story of the day, trying to bring this story to life that is so well known here, and it's an even greater privilege because Tim is a friend and has been a huge inspiration to me. So there's a bit of pressure here. Welcome back to New Zealand. You don't come back very often. Tim's here for 48 hours. He's flown in from San Francisco, so that probably deserves a clap in and of itself. So, where to start? I mean, the Allbirds journey we know of, but just to put some numbers around this, one of the fastest ever consumer brands to $200 million in revenue, about $500 million New Zealand revenue these days. This session is, as Sam has just laid out, to tell the story, but to provide some inspiration, some pride, some ambition in the room, Tim. New Zealand is a hell of a place to start a business. I'm sure you have a view on this, and I want to hear about it. But I want to set this up like almost the hero's journey. You'll feel a bit queasy about me. National icon, I'm calling you a hero. The hero's journey, this narrative arc, and it's not yet complete, so, but there are trials and tribulations along the way. So I'm going to set it up as that narrative arc. And the best place to start, I think, is way back at the start. And I want to get into that mind as to what your emotion was when you kicked off. And you can either answer that now, or if you don't mind, just my indulgence, I've actually got your Kickstarter video from when you started in 2014. What do you want to do? Do you want the video, or do you want to give us a sense of what was going on in your mind at the time?
I don't think I need to talk. You should just go. Just keep going. Just keep running.
National icon, okay.
So to set this up, and first of all, it's so great to be home. In my mind, the weather is always perfect in New Zealand. Everyone is friendly all the time. There's no social problems. And you come back and you could skim a stone over Auckland Harbour, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? It's so good to be home, so good to see you. Thank you very much for coming. To set this up, so I was playing sport back in Wellington, in my hometown, in the A-League in Australia. And I'd had this idea. It was nothing more than really a curiosity project. And I'd worked on it for a number of years, 3 or 4 years. Retired from sport, gone to business school, found myself in an entrepreneurship class with a professor in America who called me into his office and said, "This is the worst idea I have seen." And trust me, I've been working in this space for a long time. This is by far and away the worst. You don't know anything about shoes. Shoes are too hard to make. Oh gosh, I wish you grew up on a sheep farm because at least there'd be something there. But for whatever reason, of all the 60 people in my class, you were trying the hardest. And so I just thought I'd give you the gift of telling you to your face this is going to fail. And I worry about people like you because if I worry you're just going to keep on going because you're determined for so long and you'll make yourself miserable. So just put it on Kickstarter or something so it can fail quickly, and then you can get on with the rest of your life knowing that it was a bad idea, like I know now. And I walked out of that office going, I think he likes me. And I went home and I go, you know what? I'm going to put it on Kickstarter, and with the help of my brother, $700, we wrote a script the night before and shot a video that started the whole thing.
We know you like pain. You've got a high pain threshold. We'll come to that. Cue the video. Let's take it back to 2014.
Ready? Sweet. G'day guys. If you wore shoes without socks for over a month, would they smell? Of course they would. Well, these don't. How is this possible? The answer is wool. You can't grow up a Kiwi and not understand how good wool is. It's tough, regulates temperature, reduces smell, wicks away moisture, and importantly, is a sustainable and biodegradable resource. We embarked on a journey to create our first shoe, designed specifically for sockless shoe wear, with as few seams as possible. A shoe that bridged sport and fashion and was as comfortable with a pair of jeans as it was in the gym. A beautiful, simple, minimalist running shoe that would help us launch a whole new category of footwear. The result is the Wool Runners. We need your help to shake up the shoe industry and take our fit wool, New Zealand wool, and the Wool Runners to the world. Oh shit.
Wow.
So I was up in front of camera. We'd just written the script, and I'm a little wooden, to put it kindly. And my brother, he's like, "Look, I should be at work. I don't need to be doing this. Can you just bring something?" And he went over to the fence where those shoes were hanging, and it was electrocuted, and he electrocuted himself on the fence. And I thought it was a sign from above, and I've never laughed so hard, and that was the beginning. And I think the lesson there is this was an idea even that had been criticised. But sometimes you just got to start, and you've got to put it out into the world, and that did $125,000 worth of sales in 4 days. I only had enough material to make 1,000 pairs of shoes. I had to shut it down before my mum could buy a pair because she couldn't work out the interface on Kickstarter. And that really was the beginning. It was the beginning of traction. It was the beginning of having the courage to maybe put myself out there, and that did take courage to move this thing forward.
There are some great podcasts and other interviews you've done of that founding story, so we won't go into that now. I will add that you're probably a little greyer now than what you were 10 years ago, mate. There's been
Touche.
Well said. And of course, not just wool. I've got my vegan leather Pacers on. You've got the sweet foams on as well. So this business has gone from that to ringing the bell at the NASDAQ 8 years later. Wild. Absolutely wild. So it is possible from New Zealand. You just have to have a little bit of belief, a little bit of Kiwi ingenuity, grit, hustle, and that probably takes me. Actually, audience questions can be submitted via Slido. They'll pop up on our screen here. We'll try and interweave those as they come through and are moderated. So I encourage you, if there is something, a burning question on your mind, to dive in there. So my first kind of question to you, having seen that, is what in your mind did you harness that was uniquely Kiwi? Because we hear of Kiwi ingenuity and we can touch on that, but there must have been something deep within you that you think was unique to being a New Zealander.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look. Getting ahead of the sheep jokes that inevitably you're going to tell at some point through this. There's the sheep piece there, so that's obvious, the fibre, the material. I mean, I think I'd grown up with that, coming back to Auckland, one of the things that was maybe something I haven't talked about as much, but I'd read this book about the founding story of Nike, and Bill Bowerman, who you remember was the iconic track coach from the University of Oregon, had come down to New Zealand, actually to Auckland in the 60s, because New Zealand had won a couple of gold medals in 1964, Peter Snell, and they'd had this sort of community of extraordinary runners, and he wanted to come down and understand why these elite runners were doing so well. There must be some secret, there must be something in the food or something. And he came down, Bill Bowerman, observed the famous track coach Arthur Lydiard, but the thing that blew his mind was that on a Wednesday night, Arthur Lydiard was taking his neighbours, non-athletes, doctors, builders, engineers, taking them for jogs. It was an informal jogging club, and he'd never seen anything like it. And he went back to America, and he wrote a book called Jogging, that was a bestseller, popularized the everyday running movement, and gave birth really to Nike. And I was like, oh my God, no one knows this story. This is a New Zealand story, and that was a sort of like the starting point to believe, I think. I mean, Samantha, you talked about the power of stories, to believe that you could go do this, that there was a reason, that there was a historical context of the why, and so that was a starting point. And then obviously wool, that industry had been in decline for a long time, that was a piece. So I mean, this was many, many years of piecing these things together to sort of have the inspiration. And as we've gone forward now to be a company of 1,000 people, public, careful what you wish for, so many of the answers to what the next 90 years of this brand could be lie in those stories and in the founding. And I think I've come to understand the power of the founder and why you start something.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on that kind of community in a little bit, but before that, one thing that comes to mind that there's this history of Kiwi ingenuity. We know about it, and it's almost interwoven into the fabric of society, right back to the Polynesian seafarers by the stars. The Scottish settlers had to live in harsh conditions and make do off the land, and we've got the 4 mil gauge wire or the number 8 wire, and more recently, Fisher Paykel Zero. It is in the blood here. So I'm keen to kind of tease out these, I guess, cultural attributes, over and above that line of Kiwi ingenuity. And one thing that comes to mind is this interwovenness with the Maori culture that's celebrated here like no other country in the world, and something that you should be so proud of, and something that I'm incredibly jealous of as someone that grew up in Australia. And the first one is humility. And it was, I think, Maori Language Week here last week. So you can pick me up here a little bit, but whakati, humility. New Zealanders are incredibly humble people, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make for great leadership in a company sense. I have a view here, you might have a view here. I'm keen to kind of unpack that as an attribute as to whether it helped or hindered your journey as a founder.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think, look, let's frame it positively. There is an ability to go after things that are really important, I think, without ever taking yourself too seriously, and that is a unique trait globally. I think we carry our sense of humour, which is a gateway into our humility, or connected to our humility, and it's a weapon, I think. It's disarming, certainly in an American context, where I think if the idea's not here, it needs to be here, and you need to be self-promoting, and that's part of certainly in a venture ecosystem. And I think New Zealanders maybe come in and approach it differently, because that's how we're trained. And look, I think there's been a lot of talk of the limitations of that. I'm sure it'll come up in this conference. We need to be more ambitious, more global, more assertive. And I disagree with that completely. I think we've got to understand that confidence and humility can coexist. I think I've come to understand that in America. One other story, I was at a dinner here in Auckland a number of years ago, and the same sort of trope or theme came up, that New Zealanders tended to not be sort of punchy enough, certainly when it came to building businesses, and we could be more ambitious. And there was a guy called Rowan Simpson, who'd been one of the early founders of Trade Me, and he said, what if the rest of the world's got it wrong and we're actually exactly right? And I love that. I was like, damn, that is going to be my motto moving forward. I'm not changing for anyone. I don't think we should go changing for anyone. And yet, I think that there's the sharpening of edges, and I've certainly learned, having lived in the San Francisco ecosystem, a little bit of an ability to see confidence as a partner of humility, so that we can be more assertive about what we want and more confident that the things we build can have global impact. Because I think you see that in the stories that are happening in the businesses that have been built, and I think it's an extraordinarily interesting time for this New Zealand entrepreneurial ecosystem, and I think those traits, those things that make us different, are the things that will fuel our success.
Question just popped up on the Slido that's probably a good place to segue around. When did you realise that you had to go? And I know this story, so it might be worth sharing just briefly why Allbirds essentially became an American business.
Well, I mean, again, these things are always a little personal. I'd finished sport and I'd gone to England to study, and then a little bit to America. I think there was certainly an element of feeling at the time that every time I raised a business idea, people would go out of their way to give me 10 good reasons why it would fail. And I certainly felt in my experience in America, there was always 10 good reasons why it was going to be the next great thing. So there is an element of that, and yet it was more personal than anything. I do think there's an element of consumer products and the American market that's been so important for Allbirds that I think would have been really difficult to access from here and a little slower. But again, fast forward to now, access to capital I don't think is an issue. I think in San Francisco everyone's aware of this ecosystem. I think there's exemplars now, whether it be Halter, Xero, Fisher & Paykel, you name it, businesses that Canva, that have come and taken on the world from this part of the, So I think it's a little different for us at that particular time. That's where we needed to be, and San Francisco was where we founded the business. And I think it's highly contextual, but I think it's changed.
Yeah.
And so it's a real privilege, I think, to be on the edge of the world, and I think it gives you some unique advantages that you should take advantage of.
Yeah, well said. Back to these cultural attributes, because I've got a few more to kind of roll through, and this is probably harder to pronounce. Kaitiaikia kitanga. This connection between past generations, the environment, and future generations. Sounds like a bit of a Allbirds mission statement almost. Like there must be something inherently inside your upbringing that has led you to your belief around sustainability.
I mean, it would be easy to say yes, and that wasn't the experience. I think through my co-founder, we adopted an environmental purpose, or I found an environmental purpose in the business that wasn't there at the beginning, candidly. I think I'd always grown up with an empathy for the environment. I'd had my mum literally making me check the little tags on every piece of clothing that I wore to make sure that I wasn't wearing plastic. So, I mean, sure. But I wouldn't say that at the start of Allbirds, that was where we... But what I did know from my sporting experience, I'd be interested in your comments on this. I found myself playing professional sport. It had always been a dream. And then when I was doing it, it was a little hollow. And then I realized, oh my gosh, playing for my country was something like transformative. I had a taste of playing for New Zealand, and it was nothing else. It was transformative for me. And so that was the beginning of understanding the power of purpose. And I think purpose has almost become a bit of a cliche in building business. You can apply purpose to just about anything. But I think it's something deeper in you. I wasn't interested in just making shoes or making money. There needed to be a larger sense of a problem that I was solving. and I understood the power of that in sport, and then found it again in the context of Allbirds. And it didn't get any easier, but when I met Joey, and this went from wool shoes to being about making better things in a better way and being part of a transformation of making the products and the services that we use every day, it didn't get any easier from that point, but my gosh, you weren't going to stop me. You know, so there's something about that you unlock in yourself, that you place something in a historical context and you realize it matters and you could make a contribution. Careful, watch out when you unleash that in all of you. And I think if we could draw a bow back to New Zealand upbringing and things matter, I think you could, but I equally want to sort of say that it was a little different for me personally.
I'm happy for you to push back. That's an interesting context. Speaking of purpose, like I would describe Allbirds as a purpose-native brand, as you've just almost described it, I guess. What's the competitive advantage that you feel that Allbirds has, because from day one, inside the DNA of the business has really been this purpose?
It was always for something more. It was to make incredible products and to sell those incredible products and to build a profitable, sustaining business. But we also wanted to make our own little dent, or we want to make our own little dent in the universe. And I think at that particular stage, going back to 2015, I don't think that the challenge of climate change and even the word sustainability was in popular usage in the way that it is now. And I don't think we fully understood the extent of the challenge. And I think incredible credit to my co-founder, in the same way that I had a vision for the product, he had a vision for a world that needed to change and that we were going to need to reimagine the way that we made things, and that it was going to come to fashion first, and that there was very few that were actually doing much more than paying lip service to that idea, and that there was an opportunity to harness the idea of sustainability, not just to do good, but to actually make better products because of that. And that we'd started with natural materials. For 50 years, we've been innovating out of plastic, effectively, in the fashion industry, and there was an opportunity to bring that back. And that got me really excited. And I think that fueled this ability to go through the short-term barriers of just getting something from nothing to underway because you believed that it mattered. And so I think that was certainly an important part of our founding story.
So just picking up on those barriers, every strategic decision has trade-offs. Otherwise, it's not strategy. What were the trade-offs that you had to make, I guess, to have this DNA? There must have been some shade. There must have, whether it's an increase of cost or time to market, there must have been a trade-off along the way. I'm sure there's been plenty, but maybe some colour on that.
Not as it related to our purpose, because our purpose was never up for trading. It's amazing how many people have come up to us now in the context of being a public company. They've said, oh, you know, it's not quite gone as well as you might have hoped. Time to drop that sustainability thing. You know, wink, nod. No. That's the whole reason we started this. We could no more disown that than we could our own family. It's like that intrinsic. And so I think it's the wrong way of thinking about it. I think where the strategy comes in and where the trade-offs come in is that when you're thinking about transformation and you believe fundamentally that people don't want to buy sustainability, they want to buy great products, you've got to go where the opportunities present itself, where sustainability can actually make a better product experience. And that's where I think you look for opportunities. In our particular case, natural materials against the skin creates an experience that's unmatched. Polyester and nylon can't compete, and so we were going to compete with a better product experience. And that, I think, is the nuance of the trade-offs and the nuance of thinking through the way that you approach entering the market.
Yeah, I love when you say a product can't be truly great unless it's sustainable, and that is at the heart of everything you've done. And the flip side of that, I guess, is the NPS that you have achieved. Consumer best in class, 90 plus. It's insane.
Yeah, certainly as it relates to your purpose. Don't think people buy it. That may be the thing that motivates you. It may be pure, it may mean something, but at the end of the day, you've got to make a better product. Don't lose sight of that. And so the intersection of purpose and profit is something that you've got to keep in mind, and you have to be very pragmatic at the same time that you're very emotional about why you're doing something. Just don't conflate the two, and keep them both in balance. To your point, it's not enough to make a sustainable product. You've got to make a great one, but I don't think that anyone can lay claim to a product being great at the moment unless you're deeply anchored in the idea of sustainability. Okay, that's different. That's our hook. That's our focus, and that's how we'll drive this business forward.
Let's get back to the company building side of things. And we have this conversation often with our mutual connection through sport, but you have this really deep lens of high performance, having grown up in professional sport. And then this second act of yours is trying to scale a business, which inherently relies on you being able to scale the culture of that business. So I'm keen to kind of unpick the key learnings, but also maybe touch on, you recommended me a fantastic book only a few weeks ago called Belonging by Owen Eastwood. And so, whakapapa, belonging, this connectedness, unbroken between generations, and this sense of sacred identity. What have you learnt around scaling people?
Yeah, look, it's a great book. Owen Eastwood, Belonging. Culture's on my mind a lot, certainly as we enter our 8th year of a business. I think it's a word that everyone uses, and I think very few can actually define very well. If I asked you what is your pithy definition of culture, it would be all over the map. And I think that's a watch out. It's certainly been a watch out for us. From the beginning, we did 3 things that were, I think, incredibly important for us. We defined a mission statement, a singular statement of intent that we imagined would last for 100 years. It was that set in stone. We defined 3 values that were going to characterize the way that we behaved as a business, and then we wrote a vision statement 10 years into the future, literally a story of the mistakes that we would make, the successes we would have, the fun we would have along the way, and where we would be literally on a morning in 2025. And we gave that story to everyone that interviewed with us. We still do, and it was a power of storytelling. And I'll be honest, at the beginning of that process, I was like, oh my God, I do not want to do this. And it was incredibly valuable. So we did that, and then I think along the way, we probably took our foot off the gas in continuing to invest in culture. And I think I got to the point where I asked myself, what exactly is culture? I'm using this word, I know it's important, and I couldn't define it. And so I spent a lot of time trying to work out what that was.
What about your own role in that storytelling? How's that changed over time? Because Owen talks about this us story that has to be passed through, and in a business sense, it's from employee to employee.
Yeah, I think so. We defined the values. I imagine every organisation here has some form of values. I think the thing that we didn't do, and this is where Owen has been a friend and a mentor and is helping us literally in real time. The values, I'll give you one, curiosity. In and of itself, it's a great word. It's kind of a soft word. It sort of suggests that I'm going to float around, maybe ask some big questions, watch the birds, get a coffee, probably not work that hard, and if anyone puts me under too much pressure, I'll tell them to back off because I'm in a creative space. That's like a pejorative. That's a negative interpretation. What is actually curiosity? That is the willingness to ask the tough questions, to put the customer at the center of it. Some of the founding stories and some of the obstacles we overcame in the early stages are rich in overcoming adversity. And Owen's been the one that's kind of gone back and said, actually, you've got to tell these. Values alone are not enough. The word curiosity could be applied to any business. You've got to now connect that value to a set of behaviors, and you've got to connect those behaviors to stories, and then you've got to tell them. So that the people in your organization, they understand when they're in a meeting and they feel like a bad decision is being made or the consumer is not being championed, that they have the power, wherever they sit in the organization, to put their hand up and say, I don't know this is right. That's what I want curiosity to mean. And I know that, and I feel like when we were sub 50 people, I probably modeled it, and now we're 1,000, and somewhere along the way we lost the fidelity of that sharp edge and the power of telling the stories around why we did this. Don't just tell the stories about when it went really well. Tell the stories when you fucked up. You know, Owen, again, has told me the story about the Maori meeting house and the idea that when you're carving stories, as they do within a meeting house, they carve the bad stories as well as the good ones. You don't get the opportunity in your history just to tell the good bits. So tell those as well, because they're just as powerful. And I think we stopped doing that as well as we could. And so Owen is, you know, working with him closely now to kind of come back in and take the word curiosity and say, when was curiosity dangerous, a problem? When did you make a mistake? When did you ask too many questions and you didn't act? You know, and the meat on the bone around this and the ability to take the stories and bring them to life within an organization, that is culture. That is how you actually shape an organization so people feel something, and more importantly, they know what to do.
While we're touching on those moments that probably haven't gone as suggested, every hero's story has its trials and tribulations, and probably the last year of Allbirds has been hard. There's no denying that. So I'm curious, you know, we put founders and the founding journey up on a pedestal. Every media article generally is a positive one. What's unravelled for you about yourself that you've learnt in the adversity, particularly over the last 18 months?
That as hard as this has been in the last year, and it has been challenging for us, let me tell you when it was really difficult. When I was in London trying to spend my entire life savings, and I had a tiny apartment full of wool shoes and a future father-in-law that was looking at me with skepticism about my desire to marry his daughter because of my future financial prospects and my business trajectory. It's when I found out the factory that was making the Kickstarter shoes was going bankrupt, and I flew to Portugal to try and save the last amount of wool to make the last 100 pairs, and the only car they had at the rental office was a pink smart car. And I drove to this factory to rescue this wool, and the wool was too long to fit in the car, so I had to wind the back window down and find a small factory literally in the basement of someone's house in a suburb in Porto. Those were moments where I'm like, whoa, there's no hope here. And what am I doing? And I've never really told them. Part of me was embarrassed by them. And now I've gone back and sort of said, hey, this is just the cycle of this thing. You have moments, and Allbirds has had, as you've kindly pointed out, a meteoric rise. And now we're in a period of doubt again. Okay, we've had those before, I certainly have, and they've been worse. And so what are we going to do? We're going to focus, we're going to re-anchor ourselves in the strategy and the values. And then as a leader, I'm going to tell these stories because I think they matter. One brief story, and I'm sure you will have heard this, but it's been really powerful for me, and it got shared by a friend of mine. It's the parable of the farmer. Have you guys heard this? Indulge me a second. So there's this farmer. He's got a horse, small plot of land, a horse. He's farming the land, and one day the horse runs away. The small village that he's nearby runs in, and the villagers say to the farmer, terrible news, you lost your horse. And he goes, we'll see. And the next day, the horse comes back with 6 other horses. So the villagers come and they say, congratulations, what incredible good fortune. And he says, we'll see. And his son is training one of the horses, trying to break it in, and he gets flipped off the horse and breaks his leg. The villagers come in, what terrible bad luck. We'll see. The next day, the army comes in recruiting for a war, can't recruit his son. It's a bloody war, and the son survives. And that parable got shared with me. You may have encountered it. It was so important. When I think about the entrepreneurial journey, all the things that I thought were really good, we raised the round. Everything's, you've gone public. It was actually the beginning of a really challenging period. And the bits that were difficult, in hindsight, and we kind of know this, those were the things that brought out the people that really cared about you. Those were that brought out the stories that mattered. Those brought out the resilience, and the people that I'm sure have been part of your stories that have almost gone out of the way to give you hope. Those things happen, and yet we're sometimes so close to it. We're so much at the coalface we can't see. And so I think that, you've got to zoom back, and we've got a bunch of challenges. My gosh, with the benefit of a little bit of perspective, we'll see if this moment isn't the bit that catalyzes us to go and be the 100-year brand that I think that we can be.
Depends how, you beat me to the punchline, depends how short your lens is as to your viewpoint.
Yeah, I think it's a really important skill to be able to zoom into the details as a founder and a leader, and then find a way to zoom all the way out. Your single biggest job is to define the vision and to make sure you continue to reset that, both to inspire people, but to chart the course, and you can't do that when you're at the coalface. And I think one of the big things that I've learned through this period, do not conflate hard work with the right work. Everyone here is working hard, possibly too hard. Are you zooming back as the founder and the leader to set the vision and chart the course in the right way? And I think that's been a big lesson, that ability to detach and zoom back.
So paint me the 20-year vision from here. What impact can you hope that Allbirds would have had on a 20-year view?
It's interesting, when we founded the business in 2015, sustainability wasn't really a word that was used much. Fast forward to 2023, in all the best of ways, you can't walk down the high street without a brand making claim or laying claim to the idea that they are engaging with this topic, which is fantastic. I would hope that we can be an exemplar of purpose and profit, and sustainability is truly an engine of building a successful business, and that we've made a difference in showing that we need to stop using plastic in our products derived from barrels of oil, and that there's an opportunity in nature and in natural materials to do things differently, and that's a big part of the answer, and I would love to think that we could do that. We've got all the pieces. We've got to keep on going.
That will be the hero returns moment. I'm going to go to a couple of these Q&As. Jay's question's been voted up, so to speak. Have you heard from the professor that thought your idea stunk?
You guys know the answer to this. Yeah. You guys know the answer to this. If someone goes out of their way to be that mean to you, they're either a dick or they care deeply, and you've got a Carter Cast, who is that professor, cared deeply, and it was a push and it was a nudge because he cared. Oftentimes we can't see that, and he is someone I talk with every couple of months. It's the way these things work. People find you and they want to, oftentimes we're so caught up in it we can't kind of see it. But Carter and probably 2 or 3 others, one of them who's sitting in the audience, Jamie McClellan, a New Zealander, at the darkest moments they come and find you. And they say, pick yourself up, let's go again, there's something to this. So you got to listen. I firmly believe that this journey has been as much spiritual as it's been programmatic or strategic. And I think if you're open to that, good things will come. And I was open to Carter. I walked out of his office and I said, this guy loves me, let's go do the Kickstarter campaign. So here we are.
Here we are in Auckland. What's changed? Last question about the startup scene. I mean, imagine if Blackbird existed when Allbirds had kicked off.
It would have been a natural match, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. What's changed coming home?
I don't know. I don't know that it's much has changed. I think there's increasing confidence. I can feel it in this room, and that's awesome. And I think that we're starting to understand that we can do it, and we can do it from this corner of the world. And per Rowan Simpson, we don't need to change. We don't need to change for anyone. And that what we have is special, and that we can go into most environments in the world incredibly determined, but carrying our sense of humour pretty close, and our ability to not take ourselves too seriously, and that can get us in just about any room that we want to. And so I'm incredibly excited about the future of the startup scene, Auckland on this beautiful day, New Zealand. I think there's so many exciting things ahead, and I just watch the space. Watch the space. I can feel it in this room. Watch the space.
I'm excited for today. What a way to kick it off. Tim Brown.